My mom chose my toxic stepsister over me and eventually kicked me out. Now I'm engaged, and my fiancé's company dropped her husband. She blames me. I'm 26 and engaged to my fiancé, Jeff, who is also 26. We've been engaged for 2 months, but met 4 years ago on a dating app. Since then, we've been inseparable. Jeff truly feels like my soulmate. He's the only person who has never let me down. My life hasn't been easy. My parents divorced when I was just 2. My father provided child support but completely abandoned us otherwise. He never checked in or cared how I was doing. My mother, now 48, wasn't much better. When I was young, she focused more on her social life than on raising me. I was left in the care of nannies and babysitters most of the time. Even as I grew older, she wasn't invested in being a parent. She preferred spending time with friends or dating. She did freelance art, which earned decent money, and with the child support covering expenses, she didn't need to worry much about me. Honestly, if it hadn't been for those payments, I think she would have pushed me out sooner. She never seemed committed to me, and I always felt she was just waiting for me to grow up so I'd leave her alone. When I was about 13, she started dating Matt, who's now 50. He had a daughter close to my age. We'll call her Jess. When Mon introduced us, she told me to be on my best behavior, which was unusual. She'd brought home plenty of boyfriends before, but never cared how I acted. Normally, she'd just warn me that guests were coming and I'd stay in my room until they left. This time felt different. She clearly took Matt seriously, or she wouldn't have been concerned about my behavior. The first time I met Matt and Jess, they seemed kind. And it was a smooth introduction. I had no idea how things would change. Soon, Matt was around constantly, and before long, it felt like he and Jess were living with us. Jess split her time between our house and her mom's, but they were both present often. At first, everyone was polite or just ignored me, which I didn't mind. I wasn't attached to my mother, so it was hard to care about anyone connected to her. All I wanted was peace and space, which I still had until they made it official and moved in permanently. That's when my mother told me I'd need to share my room with Jess. I refused. It was my room, the one place where I felt calm and private, and I wasn't going to give that up for someone I barely knew. When I told her no, we had a huge argument. She even threatened to kick me out if I didn't agree. I was only 14, but I knew my rights. She couldn't legally force me out until I was an adult. And I told her that. She was angry but eventually gave in, converting the basement into Jess's room instead. It wasn't a bad setup. The basement was made comfortable and looked as nice as the other bedrooms. I couldn't understand the problem. Still, from that moment on, Jess resented me. Looking back, I think the issue started when Mom gave them the house tour. In front of everyone, she announced Jess would live in the basement because I had refused to share my room. I don't know why she phrased it like that, but it embarrassed me. Maybe she wanted to stir up tension between us, or maybe she just enjoyed the drama. Either way, Jess took it personally and never let it go. From then on, she treated me like an enemy. The days she stayed with us were unbearable. She became openly hostile, making cruel remarks to my face. For example, she once said the reason my father left my mother was probably because of me, then laughed about it. She mocked my weight at the time and even made fun of me at school. Jess had a large group of mean friends, and with them, she made my life miserable. Jess and her friends never missed a chance to bully me. At first, they would just ignore me, which I actually preferred. We were never friends, but being ignored was far better than being treated like an enemy. The hardest part was knowing I hadn't done anything to her. She was simply upset that I refused to share my room with her. It felt like a ridiculous reason to hate me so deeply and try to make my life miserable. That room was the only safe space I had. With a mother like mine, I think anyone would understand why I wanted privacy. If someone in the family had made the effort to get to know me, maybe I would have been open to sharing. But Jess was a stranger, and I didn't feel comfortable giving up my independence for her. I never complained to my mother or stepfather, Matt, because they already knew what was happening and chose to ignore it. They didn't care if I was bullied. I could have been treated badly every day, and they still would have dismissed it because to them, I wasn't important. So I endured it. Sometimes I fought back, but I quickly learned that only made things worse. Whenever our parents stepped in, I was the one punished. Jess could cry on command, play the victim, and avoid consequences. I wasn't manipulative like her, so I always ended up grounded and lectured about treating her like a sister. Meanwhile, she got away with everything. ... Growing up in that house was miserable, and I hated my life there. By the time my mother kicked me out near my 18th birthday, I felt more relieved than devastated. I had put up with years of this dysfunction, and it had only gotten worse. Jess kept making my life unbearable, and my parents supported her every time. She even managed to turn most of our high school against me. Aside from a small handful of friends, no one wanted to associate with me because Jess didn't, and that was reason enough for them. It deeply affected my mental health. I struggled to cope, started binge eating, and gained a lot of weight. My appearance changed for the worse. I was overweight, had acne, and my hair looked terrible. On top of that, I was barely managing my grades. To everyone else, I looked like someone who was failing in every area. I truly had nothing going for me and felt like I had hit rock bottom. Life at home was no better. My mother constantly compared me to Jess, even though she was the one who had made my life so much harder. Things weren't good before she married Matt, but after he and Jess moved in, it only got worse. She went from being indifferent toward me to actively tearing me down. It felt like I was living with a group of bullies under my own roof. It became clear that Jess was the daughter my mother wished she had. She saw me as a disappointment. While Jess was everything she wanted, both of them wanted me gone, and to be honest, I wanted to leave too. Matt didn't care either way, and I had no other family to turn to. My grandparents weren't in contact with us. I never knew my father, and I had no connection to his side of the family. With nowhere else to go, I stayed because at least I had food and a roof over my head. I just needed to hold on until I turned 18. But a few weeks before my birthday, something happened that pushed me out of the house immediately. It was a weekend, and I remember it clearly because it was one of the most stressful days of my life. Jess had recently graduated and started spending time with a bigger social circle. One of her friends was dating a college student, so she was often around older kids who drank and smoked. I knew exactly what she was doing, but I didn't mention it to my parents. Experience had taught me that if I tried, it would only backfire. Unlike Jess, I never had access to alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs. I also wasn't interested. I already struggled with my weight and schoolwork. Adding substances to the mix was the last thing I needed. That day, I must have left my room unlocked when I went to take a shower. Suddenly, I heard banging on the bathroom door. My mother was yelling at me to come out immediately. When I rushed to my room, she, Matt, and Jess were waiting. My mother pulled several empty beer bottles from under my bed, along with a large bag of marijuana. I knew right away that it didn't belong to me. I believe Jess planted it there and told my mother about it while I was out of the room. My parents exploded, accusing me of being a disappointment and a burden. My mother went beyond the alcohol and drugs, saying I ate too much, wasted their money, and would never amount to anything. I tried to explain that it wasn't mine, but she didn't believe me. When I suggested Jess had set me up, my mother accused me of being jealous and trying to shift the blame. I broke down crying, but it made no difference. After yelling at me for a while, she told me to pack my things and leave. I didn't understand at first, so I asked where she expected me to go. She said she didn't care. I just needed to get out. If I refused, she threatened to call the police and report me for the drugs, adding that because I was nearly 18, the charges would be taken seriously. She told me she was done supporting me and no longer wanted to pretend we were a family. I begged her not to make me leave. Even though I wanted out of that house, I had no money and nowhere to go. But she didn't care. She said if I wasn't gone by the end of the day, she would call the police herself. I was shocked by how cruel she was, and even more shocked that neither Matt nor Jess objected. They carried on with their day as if nothing unusual was happening. After hours of crying and begging, I finally started packing my things. I would have chosen to live on the streets rather than risk being arrested for drug possession. By the evening, I had packed my things, and as I walked out, no one said goodbye. I didn't look back. At first, I went to a park and sat on a bench for a few hours. But when it got too cold, I decided to go to a friend's place and hope they would let me stay. I went to my best friend Amy's apartment and asked if I could spend a few days there. Amy already knew what my parents were like, so I didn't need to explain much. When I told her about what happened that day, she was horrified. She said her parents could help me if I allowed them. For years, I had asked her not to share what I went through at home, even with her parents, because I wasn't sure if anyone would believe me. I also felt uncomfortable opening up about my private life. But that day, she insisted I tell them. They were just as shocked as Amy and immediately tried calling my mother. The conversation went nowhere. She was rude to them, and they realized speaking with her would not solve anything. Then they did something I'll always be grateful for. They promised I could stay with them as long as I needed and that they would support me. They were financially well off, and Amy was happy to share her room with me, so I had a safe place. I stayed with them for the next few years while I attended community college, which was the only school that accepted me due to my poor grades. I also started working and saving to get my own place, but Amy's parents never made me feel pressured to leave. They treated me like part of their family. About 3 years ago, I finally saved enough to move out. I was proud of myself, but also deeply thankful to Amy and her parents. I couldn't have done it without them. On moving day, they helped me get settled into my new home and told me I would always be welcome back, whether to visit or even live with them again. That was the turning point in my life. By then, I had lost a lot of weight and my health had improved. I felt and looked better. I was financially stable, independent, and ready to focus on myself. I even decided to start dating because I wanted to get married someday. Before meeting Jeff, I dated a few men, but nothing became serious. Once I met Jeff, I understood why. He was different. We were meant for each other. Unlike the others, He was genuine. When we first started dating, I had no idea he came from wealth or that he would eventually inherit his father's company. I liked him for his personality. He was funny, charming, and kind. Months later, he told me about his family's restaurant business, which he would eventually take over. Many people might assume that changed things for me, but it didn't. I saw him the same way I had before, and I loved him just as much. After about a year, we moved in together. By then, I had already met his family, and they welcomed me warmly. Everything was going well. So when he asked me to marry him recently, I didn't hesitate to say yes. We've been engaged for 2 months now, and life has been great. But 2 weeks ago, I received an unexpected email from Jess. We hadn't spoken in nearly 8 years, and I hadn't heard from my family since being kicked out. I couldn't understand why she was contacting me now, especially to apologize. I was confused about why she would bring this up after so many years. The timing seemed suspicious, since I had recently announced my engagement on social media. I had a feeling she knew about it and that this wasn't just an attempt to make peace. Out of curiosity, I did some digging. That's when I discovered Jess's husband owned a company that supplied takeout containers and other products to Jeff's restaurant chain. Creating a fake profile, I found her husband's business details online. It wasn't difficult. I already knew quite a bit about Jeff's business since I had been preparing to help run it with him after his father retired. Once I realized Jess's husband was a supplier, I immediately told Jeff. For years, I had avoided keeping up with my family. I never followed them online and asked my friends not to update me. I didn't even know Jess was married, but now, knowing she was connected to Jeff's business, we had to act. Jeff and his father had already been considering dropping her husband's company because the quality of their products had declined. They were in talks with another supplier offering better prices and quality. My information only confirmed their decision. So last week, Jeff officially ended their contract. Jess, however, believes I influenced this purely out of revenge. She began accusing me through emails and social media, claiming I had held a grudge all these years. She even wrote online that her husband's company had been losing clients, and losing Jeff's account was the final blow. She tagged our business page, escalating the situation publicly. While I admit that part of this felt personal, the decision was ultimately about business. Jess may think I had control over it, but in truth, Jeff and his father would not have canceled a major contract based only on my word. Still, I felt guilty at first, but when Jeff reviewed everything with his father's lawyers, they assured us we had acted correctly. We are now pursuing legal action to have her posts removed and to file defamation charges. Her husband's company charged too much for subpar products, and it was only natural to switch to a better supplier. Instead of improving her business, Jess chose to attack us online. A few days later, my mother also tried to get involved, once again defending Jess. It felt like I was back in high school. But this time, things are different. I don't depend on her for a home or food. She can say whatever she wants. It changes nothing. I blocked her and moved on. Since then, Jeff and his father have filed the defamation claim. We'll soon meet with a court-appointed mediator. In the meantime, I'm focusing on my engagement and my future with Jeff. We won the lawsuit. It wasn't difficult because Jeff's father's lawyers are highly skilled, and the case was clear. Jess and her husband had to pay damages, and we reached a settlement. Hopefully, they'll now focus on improving their business instead of attacking others. With that behind us, I can now focus on planning my wedding. I'm excited to marry Jeff. He is my soulmate, and after everything I've gone through, I'm grateful to have found him. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more true life stories.